There surely are people here this morning saying, Tom Owen, who? I am a resident of the Highlands, and I have served 23 of 27 years. I retired from that part-time job at the end of 2015. I served on the Metro Council and its predecessor, the Board of Aldermen, for 23 of 27 years, representing the 28,000 people that live in the Highlands. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here today because I'm wearing cardinal red, and I have been an archivist and a neighborhood historian at the University of Louisville for 46 years. At our archives and special collections, we have a massive photographic archive, about 2.6 million photographs. We have a rare books room with many documents printed as in the late 1500s, and we have archives related to the history of the university as well as the community. Our largest single collection are the papers, personal and professional, congressional, of a member of this parish originally, Romana Mazzoli. So we have the papers of Romana Mazzoli at our archive. I'm here today to talk about the history of this nurturing community as well as the history of this parish. We are defined in this place by two major highways historically. They're called turnpikes, and every 5 miles you paid a toll to use the turnpike. This is the Bardstown Bardstown Turnpike from the very early 1800s, pushed through to Bardstown. And the toll houses every 5 miles. And as the city grew, the first toll house would be pushed further and further out the pike. The one toll house at one point was literally at Bardstown Road and Eastern Parkway. The other major highway was a little lesser nature, but it was the Newburgh Turnpike. Now that's Barrett Avenue around the corner on Castlewood, and then turn right up the hill to go to Eastern Parkway by way of Baxter and Bardstown Road, Baxter and Newburgh Road. So that's the Newburgh, going to a rural community in Jefferson County called Newburgh. So that's the Newburgh Turnpike. So these two turnpikes, with one other roadway that is significant, and that was a roadway that was pushed out further from Highland and Baxter Bardstown Road, and that's Von Bury's Avenue. Oh, you know it as Baxter Avenue, headed toward Starbucks and Highland Avenue. Von Bury's Avenue was also a major roadway. These turnpikes developed over time. First, there were rural estates. An earlier one was the Preston Estate, very small but major landowners that was there at Winter and Grinstead Drive. Another major plantation home was over here very much near you, and that was on Rosewood. And that was the Johnston family home. That was a daughter of the Prestons, and that home is still there on Rosewood, a large multi-family home. These turnpikes served as a major way to get into the rural hinterlands. But the next phase of development comes with a transportation innovation. Can you agree with me that neighborhoods are formed fundamentally because of the transportation that is available, right? So in modern times, you have a subdivision that is automobile accessible, and it sure helps if it's near an interstate highway. And so you push further and further into the rural hinterlands by way of the automobile accessibility. This neighborhood develops by transportation innovation but by way of a very different innovation. The mule-drawn streetcar that comes along pushing up the Baxter and Broadway Hill, basically in 1870. That mule-drawn streetcar is electrified by 1890 and pushes further and further out the Bardstown Turnpike. Similarly, a little later, there will be a streetcar that comes to the intersection of Castlewood and Barrett. Again, these neighborhoods grew. The 19th century word is addition. The 20th century word is subdivision. Sometimes a subdivision would be two streets, a piece of farmland converted into subdivided land, houses built, one addition at a time, moving out the two turnpikes into this area. Along the streetcar corridors, especially on Bardstown Road, Baxter and Bardstown Road, you will see a development. At the streetcar stops, there will be a commercial property developed, because that's where you got off of the streetcar and went shopping for the groceries daily, perhaps, or the hardware store, or the cleaners. Frequently, the commercial property on the corner would be developed, and that's how Bardstown Road developed. To this day, if you walk down Bardstown Road, you will see sometimes a house on the rear of the lot and a commercial building on the front of the lot. That's because it's a streetcar suburb. And so that's how this area developed. It's not a bit unusual in the early 1900s to come to a street, an end of a subdivision street, and to look over into the farm next door. That's the way the Highlands evolved. Institutions evolved in this area. In the early 1900s, there would be a German Protestant orphanage built in an old farmhouse. That's the site of Mid-City Mall to this day. In addition to that, the King's Daughters home was developed here on Norris at Stevens in 1906. So these kinds of institutions evolved in this area. And then comes the planting of this parish. At that very time of the building of additions and the development of institutions comes the development of the St. James Parish. First as a frame church and an addition ultimately of a frame school in the lot next door, 1906. But then in 1913, the cornerstone was laid for this magnificent worship center. And let me say something here that it's a little hard to grasp. Sometimes my wife says this is hard to get a hold of. But I use this as an analogy when I talk about the effort to develop the significant Olmsted Park system, Eastern Park in 1890, or in 1910, immediately near here, the Tyler Park. We hired the Olmsted landscape firm out of Brooklyn, Massachusetts. And I tease and say, oh, we could have done it for half the price. We could have skimped in the development of the park system. In fact, I make it up and say, in 1890, my brother-in-law was in the landscape business, and he could have done it for half the price. Look around you. This worship center was not built on the short. It was built to endure and to testify into the future. And so it was not a skimpy thing. It was a pouring down rain when that cornerstone in 1913 was laid. I read in the Courier Journal Clips a very interesting anecdote. The men's club of this parish had a balloon lift. A balloon lift. I don't know exactly how it occurred, but the balloon lift was bringing people together in this community to see, I guess, the lifting of some kind of hot air or helium-filled balloon. Why did they have that? To raise money for the church bell. Part of the bringing together of this community. And so it is in 1914 when this parish built this magnificent edifice. And in 1923, laid the cornerstone for the building of the school. The school was served. The teachers that taught, the nuns that taught here, were from the Ursuline Sisters of St. Joseph. And by 1910, they were already in St. Angela's home down Edenside, that large structure that still survives to this day. And so it is that this parish was planted in 1906, and then in 1914 completed this magnificent sanctuary. For those of you who have gray hair, and happily there are several of us, and who have been rooted in family and in tradition in this parish, will remember the changes that have occurred just out the door of this church. How many people remember Parrott's Cleaners here where Edenside Gallery was? Or the building, Burroughs Office Equipment Company next door in 1955. Or the city directories really confound me, and somebody needs to tell me if you can. There was the city directories say there was a pet milk company across the street. Or I sat as a young man in the Tuttle House restaurant. And the intersection of Eastern Parkway and Bardstown Road has always been challenged by service stations. One house was torn down in the late 1940s at the corner of Eastern Parkway and Bardstown Road to develop the service station where the salad restaurant is now in new construction. And do you know, when they tore down the house at Bardstown Road and Eastern Parkway, there was a proposed service station on that, but instead it became the White Castle in 1955. Tore it down in 1988, but don't you remember, there was a Valvoline going to be on that corner, but then there was some opposition and development again. So service stations have been part of the story, can you agree? In addition to that, the model drugstore, which is where Cadova is, along with the Uptown Theater, all of that is a part of memory and place. This parish is an incubator of memory. This community is an incubator of memory. Last night, I was talking to my granddaughter, remembering a family trip that we took together. Why is it important to share with the next generation the stories of place and parish? For the same reason you share stories as a family. The next generation is the vehicle of memory. You tell stories of parish and place in order to carry that story forward. Just as this magnificent edifice was built in the past for the future, so the stories of parish and place are told and repeated and captured in video and photographs and telling. It is the telling for the future. My friends, we're gathered here today for memory, and memory is much more than just looking back. Memory is a way of telling for the future, for the enduring future. Thank you very much.
Dr. Tam won't be with us for the rest of the Mass. He has some other activities. Let us stand and once again pledge our allegiance